to our final two presentations, both here, obviously starting at 4 o'clock. They are fantastic, and we're very glad, as always, to have the Watson Institute with us. And I'll introduce our guest in just a moment. Just some housekeeping, of course. Don't forget that we do have a Q&A feature here at the end. So you can send your questions in anytime, and we'll get to them at the end, as many as we can. So feel free to add them. Just use the feature and send it over, and we'll try to get to it. Also, don't forget those who we always used to do Con Ed. We know we love the Con Ed feature. Of course, we cannot get it approved this year due to the virtuality of the summit. So we regret that, but obviously we plan on being back next year, and the hope is we'll be in person and be able to offer those features again. So that is the hope. Look, we know that this summit has been different than last time, and we know that it is challenging in so many ways. That has been the experience from COVID-19, and the impact is great. And that's why, in particular, we didn't want to just not do a summit at all. And the point was, when we talked to a bunch of our friends and advocates and so forth, we felt that it was important for us to maybe talk disability and mental health issues through sort of the pandemic lens. What has been the problems, what have been the challenges, what have been the successes? And most importantly, of course, what do we need to know about going forward in the future? I think most people may know, I've been a firefighter here. I was a firefighter for 14 years in Mount Lebanon. We respond to emergencies the best you can, and then you're supposed to learn from it. And that's what we need to do, both in government and as well as providing services like in mental health and in the disability arena. But in that lens, through that lens, of course, I'm very glad to have our final two speakers here in this session to close us out. The title of this session is A Behavior Analyst. Who's the behavior analyst? Raise your hand. Bam. Okay. Thank you, Rachel. So our behavior analyst and a mental health clinician, which obviously is Erica, who's a big Steeler fan. We all know that. Appreciate it. We'll walk into a classroom and partnering through the pandemics and beyond is somewhat the name of their title, which I have butchered. And then, so we're very thankful for both of them to be here. Dr. Rachel Schwartz has worked internationally, creating and supervising programs for individuals with developmental disabilities. Rachel's work and research interests include enhancing behavior analytic programming across environments and exploring issues relating to the quality of life. Rachel has published original research on these topics in journals, as well as presented at national, state, and local conferences. Currently, she serves as an education consultant and trainer with, of course, the Watson Institute. Thank you again, Rachel, for being here. And similarly, Erica Caprini, right? I practice that, has been a psychiatric social worker for the Watson Institute Friendship Academy for more than 10 years. She has vast experience in the family structural therapy and working with teens that have a dual diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder and comorbid mental health disorders. Erica currently serves as a consultant in Upper St. Clair School District and a psychiatric social worker, of course, for the Watson Institute. Ladies, we thank you very much for bringing your professional experience here to us. We look forward to everything that you have to say, and I'll kick it to Rachel. Right?
Thank you so much, Representative Miller. We appreciate it. All right, everybody, I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to turn off my video. You don't need to see my face right now. Let me get this going, and so we can all check out the presentation here. And let me know if you guys don't see it. Oops. Okay, as Representative Miller said, we're talking about a behavior analyst and a mental health clinician go walking into a classroom, how we partner through the pandemic and beyond. We're still in the middle of pandemic, so we have some ideas about the beyond. We know this is a different year. We know this is a long day, so we just really appreciate you guys being here. We're going to do our best to break down how we work together and to answer your questions. We know everyone is sick of video conferencing. We know it's the end of the day. We totally get it. Everyone is fried. Just thank you for being here. First, let me just give a little bit more intro about who we are. I know Representative Miller gave our little bios, but just again, I'm Dr. Rachel Schwartz. I'm a behavior analyst, a special educator, consultant, and trainer. I work primarily in promoting behavior analytic practices, skill building, and in enhancing individuals with disabilities' quality of life and their quality of services. So I've worked in early intervention, K through 12 schools, adult disability programs, private clinics, kind of you name it, in the home, outside of the home, in special education. And I'm just really excited to be here today chatting with one of my favorite people, Erica.
Hi, I'm Erica Caprini, and I am a consultant and a mental health clinician at the Watson Institute. I have experience working with kids of all ages, and currently I serve high school age emotional support students and work as an interventional specialist, as well as an outpatient clinician and psychiatric social worker in a partial psychiatric hospital, an approved private school. Rachel and I met last school year as consultants working for the Watson Institute, which we continue to work for, and we have collaborated in both public and private school settings in the Pittsburgh area.
Okay, we know, you guys know about us. We want to know a little bit more about you. I know this is a really long poll to go to, but if you want to go to that link, or you can text Rachel Schwar 866. That doesn't really roll off the tongue, but RACHEL SCHWAR, numerals 866-237-607. Then you can just let us know a little bit more about who you are, so we have an idea about who's joining us today. I feel like an announcer from, Dancing with the Stars or something. Anyway, you guys, if you wanted to go ahead and text us that, then we'll just get a little bit more of an idea of who's here.
We'll give you all a minute to get all that information in before we move on.
All right, we see some others. We have some related service providers. Okay, you guys can go ahead and keep texting that. I'll give it just one more 10 seconds or so, and then we'll move on. This just helps us kind of get a sense of who's here. Other related service provider. Okay. All right, great. So we have a little bit of a varied audience today. That's great. This is really for anyone and everyone who has anything to do with schools and disabilities. All right, so why are we even doing this presentation?
So some of you may be wondering why we're doing this presentation, and I'm sure a lot of you today at 4 o'clock are saying, who cares? However, the reason we wanted to present this year is because education means working with a lot of different people and personalities. And we wanted you all to know that you're not alone on an island out there in special education. You're working with other professionals every day, as well as students and families. There are a lot of people involved in learning how to work with others. Is not a skill they teach you in school, but a skill you need to learn from trial and error.
Both Erica and I haven't always been great collaborators. We're both very stubborn people and we want things to look a certain way. Collaboration is just really, really hard. And we felt it was important, especially this year, how hard this year has been, to kind of say that out loud and recognize how hard it is, but also acknowledge that partnership is possible even when you come from such different points of view. Our work has really brought us together. We're coming from two different perspectives. So I'm a behavior analyst and Erica's a mental health professional. We were asked to co-consult in schools together. But before we get into that, let me just give you a little bit of background on our sort of professional lenses. I'm a behavior analyst, so I use the science of behaviorism and the philosophy of radical behaviorism to guide my practice. So that believes that that means that I believe that we can observe and we can track and apply tactics to change behavior. Behavior can be understood, it can be changed. My practice is objective and it focuses on the evidence that I can see and the evidence I can collect. So I take that and basically, like a detective, analyze it and then use it to reach some conclusions.
My lens is quite different. I come from a strictly clinical background and point of view. I initially started my career working in family based, which is a community based service that is providing in home family therapy to an identified patient and their families as well. And uh, you look systemically in family based, and I've brought that point of view with me throughout my career. And right now, working, in the schools, I continue to look at things through a systems lens. So I look at the students, the teachers, administrators, and parents, and look at them as the whole system and how they all function to help our kiddos. And I learned very early on in my career the importance of collaboration and communication. And in order to be effective, how important it is to be patient and, understand just different perspectives in general. So this brings us to our first challenge in working together. And that first challenge is resolving the differences in how we actually view kids and behaviors, the external and the internal, why things are occurring and how to change them. Again, Rachel and I, we come from very different perspectives. So we're going to talk a little bit about, how we manage to do that together.
I focus on observing and assessing what I can observe. I don't make any assumptions or guesses on what I think someone thinks or feels. So it was difficult initially working with Erica and from her lens, because I wanted to keep things really strictly within my point of view, thinking only about this external. And obviously, Erica has her own science and she has her own clinical experiences that guide the way she works. And we really approach things from our different sciences.
So I will beg to differ, Rachel. I don't think I am difficult to work with. And I don't think anybody has ever said that, which is so not true. But I focus on what a person may be thinking or feeling and how that influences their behaviors. So oftentimes when collaborating and working within school settings, academics obviously are expected to be front and center, the most important thing. However, coming from my clinical perspective, mental health always takes precedent. And so I'm looking at the whole person. So I'm looking at the student as a whole, what is causing the inability to perform academically. And so by doing that, I'm including their thoughts and feelings and their behaviors, into my reasoning behind why they may not be able to perform, and their ability to control these behaviors and how we can help them be more successful. So for example, we have quite a few IEPs, and when sitting in these IEPs, there's a lot of changes being made and suggestions regarding maybe assignments when you have an anxious student and them not being able to get their assignments done and making accommodations. And that's where, my clinical perspective comes in, and, we talk about how can we address the root of the anxiety or the anxiety itself, so we can start correcting these issues so they can be as successful as they possibly can be.
Before we really understood each other and we really had worked together, understood more about our different sciences, we had one big argument. We're just airing out our dirty laundry here. One big argument where I kept saying we needed to focus on this external. We really need to look at what all of us could observe happening. And Erica kept coming back to the internal. We were frustrated with each other. And for a while, I was not sure if we could collaborate well together. This was early on in our collaboration. But I think what we ended up focusing on in this argument, we kept finally circling back to this, is that we ended up realizing we were both talking about the same end goal. which was teaching the student the skills they needed to make progress. We just had completely different approaches for that goal, but that final product was the same. So we have the same intention, just entirely different routes.
And Rachel and I have had several disagreements and discussions, but this one does stand out to both of us, and and that's why we're using it in this presentation, because it was more heated than I think either one of us would like to admit. And we were actually in my office in the school building, and we had to go back into the classroom, and Rachel and I were able to come to an agreement and also agree to disagree. And we'll talk more about this as we go on, but that's how I knew that her and I would get along just fine. Her feelings weren't hurt, my feelings weren't hurt. And I think that's how I knew, Rachel, that I would really be able to work with you. So back to the different sciences. So I can teach a student to learn coping skills, but I need to make sure they occur across all environments. So I realized at this moment during our discussion that we were both working on skill-based learning, not just adaptations to the environment or the work.
And I can work on helping teachers and students learn how to use those skills in those environments. But Erica's work really helps them learn what skills work for them, those strategies that work for them, and how to do them. So we really might not share the same educational or even theoretical space, but there was a desperate need, and there is a desperate need for our collaboration this year. Okay, I know this all sounds ideal. Oh, wow, look at us now. We're best friends and we're able to work together and there's no issues. And it's not all ideal all the time, but we have figured out a way for us to collaborate effectively. And I think that's really the point of this entire presentation. The first thing that we really ended up doing was we looked at the paperwork together. We looked at the plans. So behavior plans are my world. And what we figured out is that those are treatment plans in Erica's world. So first we had to look at the plans together and just start adjusting our language. For example, in mental health, Erica's plan may focus on the diagnosis. And in my world, I focus a lot more on the behaviors or the skills associated with certain behaviors. Like one common one that we come across, for example, might be ADHD. So she might say ADHD in her treatment plan, and I'll pull out those specific executive functioning skills like self-regulation, organization, or planning. And those will be the ones that I'll pinpoint and for change and come up with strategies to change and address.
So the language was different, but the interventions were the same. I remember we finally had our aha moment when we were going through the plans, and I kept saying treatment plan. And Rachel was finally like, what the heck are you talking about? I'm sure she didn't say it like that, but and then I looked through the behavior plans on the educational side, and as Rachel looked through a treatment plan, and that's when we realized these are all about developing interventions to target the same skills. For example, we both want to work on self-regulation for a student who is yelling, in teachers, in the peers in the classroom. So we had to kind of discuss, how do we do this based on both of our backgrounds. So self-regulation, for example, it's not a mental ability or an academic performance skill. It requires a learner to identify their feelings in a moment, and in that moment they accept their emotions and they connect thoughts and actions related to those feelings. So for example, I would work with the student and say, it's okay to feel angry. You're allowed to feel angry. No one is telling you that you can't be frustrated or that you don't have the right to feel these emotions. It's what you do with these emotions and how you express yourself that impacts you and others. Again, you're allowed to be frustrated. You're allowed to be mad and angry. What you can't do is throw something, hurt somebody, hurt yourself, yell, hit, tantrum. So what can you do instead? And
Whoa, sorry, everybody.
And then in that moment, that's when Rachel would come in and kind of talk through alternative behaviors. So, if you're yelling at a peer because you want to get their attention, what are other easy things that you can do? If you're yelling to get out of the classroom, what are other ways that you do that? So I would help Rachel name and accept the feelings and how those feelings impact behaviors, and we would collaborate together on how to teach new behaviors. So that particular example leads us into this next slide in action steps. So first, we wanted to find common vocabulary. So this is action step number one. The first and best step we took towards our partnership was sitting down and talking through the vocabulary. I would say this, and Rachel would say that, and we would have these discussions throughout this, like, what do you mean? What we figured out that we were often talking about the same thing. The language was the barrier. So we needed to cut to the straight talk and find a common vocabulary. Sometimes this meant stopping the other person and saying, I don't know what you mean. What are you talking about? And Rachel and I got very comfortable interrupting each other.
Yep. In the early meetings, she'd say something every other word. I would just stop her and say, I don't understand, rephrase, give me more context. I don't understand exactly what you're describing, what you think we should do. And we would have conversations that now would take us 15 minutes, but at the time it was taking us an hour just to get through the language barrier, really, and to find that kind of common vocabulary. The next step was really then debating each other. So Erica just mentioned the interrupting. We constantly interrupted, and we still do. And we had to interrupt and put it in our own perspective. And that is really difficult to do on teams because it's easy to get offended. And we did offend each other sometimes because it is difficult to listen when you have a very strong perspective. One strategy we had or we came up with was to frame it as, when I look at this situation, I'm looking at X, Y, or Z. So for example, when I'm looking at a situation, I'm focusing on the behaviors I can see. What is the kid doing? What is he saying? I'm not speculating on any internal processes going on. Erica then will work on helping a kid think through that process. So for one situation with a student, she kept going back to the processing with the kid, working with him to write out what he was thinking and to talk through, whereas I was focused on the external behavior and the responses to that behavior. So we kept going back and forth in our teaming with him, reframing to say, okay, I see this as the issue. I see this as what we're needing to work on based on my lens. And what was helpful in that was we began to realize that we didn't necessarily agree on how we see things, but we agreed that something needed to change. So we were able to focus our areas of practice to problem solve and debate, okay, this is what I see as a problem. This is what you see as a problem based on your looking at the situation. Both of us agreed there was a problem. Both of us agreed that we need to change it. And we were able to go back and forth about the different ways to change it. So what Erica could do based on her practice and what I can do based on mine. And that's where that debate becomes productive and it really becomes healthy for a true collaboration to take place because both of our sciences have value and have value for all of our students.
So action step number 3 is having a direct conversation about roles. And when I say roles, I mean ROLES, right? Our roles. And the one thing that is helpful for both Rachel and I, that we're both assertive, and that's a skill that I teach my students and my patients. I know it sounds like a bad word, but assertive is not aggressive, right? It's how to advocate for yourself and how to speak up in an appropriate way. And so the one reason I feel that this works out so well with Rachel and I is that we both are comfortable professionally in being assertive. And so that really does help. But Rachel and I, we often joke about staying in our own lane. And we joke about this and we say this, but we mean it. And it's in order for us not to kind of go at each other, go at each other's throats. So we had to understand our roles, ROLES. So my role involves providing advocacy for students based on, their specific needs, and everybody's need is different. Sometimes this is individual meetings and sessions, practicing skills related to mindfulness, impulse control, self-regulation, and management. I also meet directly with parents, teachers, counselors, individual therapists, and administrators to identify supports and structures that we can put in place. We talk about staying in our own lanes, but what we mean is that one person can't take on everything or know everything. We each come to the table with a set experience and viewpoint. I can't do what Rachel does, and she can't do what I do. We had to have a direct conversation to be clear about what each of us do and provide. For example, Rachel does an amazing job at explaining and outlining a roadmap for each individual student. So I really value that about her work and her abilities.
Oh, thanks, Erica. In order to work together, we really had to have a candid conversation about those roles in the schools and with students. Erica works directly with the students. I do not. I come in and observe, I assess the student in the school and make a map from how to get to point A to point B. But what that means is that my recommendations directly influence her work. So rather than assume everyone is on board with all of my recommendations, or that they even feel that they are possible or right, I have to go directly to her and ask what she thinks. And we have a conversation or a debate about it. Erica is wonderful at working with students and unifying the home and the school collaboration. And because Erica has direct interaction with students and staff, she knows how to meet them where they are in the moment and how to break down the skills that they need to learn. Similarly, she'll come to me and ask questions about the best way to collect data on a skill, or how to observe a skill or progress monitor a skill. And we're able to help each other out because we have a firm understanding now of each of our roles within our collaboration, within the school, and within each student's program. One of the biggest issues in partnerships is people don't have candid and direct conversations. People rely on assumptions about roles and responsibilities, and therefore they often, and I've been this person before, so I'm not saying they as everyone else but me, I've been this person, getting offended or upset about how other professionals can discuss an issue or how we can intervene. Our students don't have the time for us to get offended. We need to have those conversations early, continue to have those conversations to promote positive outcomes. Erica and I don't always agree. We won't always agree. I can guarantee it. But we can talk to each other and we can remind each other about each of our roles and how we need to stay in our lanes in order to have the best team, to have the best team approach. That's one of the best things we've ever done, is have that kind of conversation.
Here's a story about a kid we will call Eric. Eric is a really bright young man who struggles with anxiety, impulsivity, and self-regulation.
So when I saw him, I really focused on the environment and the teaching of alternate skills. How can we teach him to give people space to think about his tone, to leave the classroom when he's beginning to feel upset versus just lashing out at someone?
And then when I would meet, with Eric, I obviously go back to my clinical skills and training, and we'll break down and focus on a crisis or safety plan, depending on the environment in public schools in a school-friendly format. So what I mean by that is I focused on helping him identify stressors or triggers, potential coping skills, how to use those coping skills in those particular situations when feeling frustrated or overwhelmed, and who he could ask for help in those situations.
So we both agreed that all of these skills need to be learned. We really agreed on that, but we disagreed on the how. I wanted to teach him one way. Erica wanted to work with him in a different way. And going back to the previous slide, we each have a lane, we each have a role. And Erica's role is providing direct therapeutic work with students. And this was an example of when I had to remember that. And I had to pull back so that she could use her expertise to get him to identify and learn these new skills.
But we were able to reach a common goal, and what basically it was, we need this kid to learn how to be safe, and how to be safe in a safe space. So that means focusing on his internal skills, managing his coping skills, and what to do when he needs to leave an area. Um, what we don't realize, and what is one of the hardest and simplest things to master, just as people in general, is feeling identification, and being comfortable enough to, being vulnerable and saying how you're feeling. So this is where Rachel and I bumped heads initially in this particular situation. Rachel had a plan for the future and all the steps on how to get there for Eric. But I had to work on the basic and first skill of identifying feelings before we could even move on. So this next slide, and then COVID happens is probably what it should say, right? And just like a big explosion, right? So then COVID-19 forced changes, to how we work. And, and the one thing that we had to put in perspective, and you all out there feel the same way, and we're feeling this as well. COVID did not just happen to my kids who have emotional support or mental health needs. COVID happened to everybody. It happened to all of us. So we needed to figure out how to support ourselves and our own families, as well as our students and schools, and also our students' families. We also had to redefine our relationship as well, because we had gotten used to a certain routine and rhythm. So right when Rachel and I were, comfortable with each other again, we had to become flexible. So COVID changed that and created an urgent need for a new partnership between the behavioral and mental health worlds. Rachel and I would meet regularly through a remote platform to go through student list and plans to discuss what we needed to do to continue to serve these students. What was difficult for Rachel was that she was no longer able to go into a classroom and observe.
Yeah, most of my role had relied on direct observations and then being in a context with a student. But now I had to rely on Erica to relay information to me and to use all these different indirect sources of data to make informed decisions and recommendations. So the difficulty for both of us was how to provide robust emotional and behavioral services remotely. And I'm sure many of you feel that as well. So let's go back to our kind of last example. How do we transfer these plans into virtual instruction? And then how did we get to collaborate effectively? So Eric was struggling in the classroom, COVID hit, and suddenly we had to rearrange our plans in order to support him.
Basically, all of our plans went out the window. So everything we had been working towards, it was gone. It was difficult to switch gears because we had already worked on a plan for Eric. We both wanted to continue to support him, and we had to get creative. We had to think outside the box and really become flexible.
Yeah, we had an opportunity with COVID to really start to target some behaviors directly and model without the distraction of a school environment. When you can't leave a classroom, what can you do? What are some ways that you can manage yourself? So Erica and I were challenged to develop a plan and have Erica implement that remotely. But the positive of this was that it allowed Eric to learn and practice skills without the pressure of the school environment. So what Erica noticed was that Eric had coping strategies he naturally used in the home environment because she was able to observe it in their sessions and during their classes. So she was able to build on those skills and help Eric create similar strategies for being physically in school.
So suddenly, this kiddo started to acquire the skills virtually that were difficult to learn in the school environment. I initially worked with him on identifying his feelings, triggers, and also appropriate camera behavior. Because again, this is new. It's a change. and we don't like change. So, feelings around the camera and, not feeling comfortable being on there, or somebody seeing your bedroom or hearing your voice, and not doing certain things on camera. So that was the first part in my initial work. So uh, Rachel and I, when we were in the school setting prior to COVID, worked with Eric on leaving the classroom when feeling frustrated and angry. So now we didn't have a classroom to leave, so we worked on different strategies on muting yourself, turning off your camera, getting a drink of water. Um, Sometimes just putting the mute button on and spinning his chair would help calm Eric. Um, this is when I was able to start connecting the natural coping skills he had in his home environment and what would be appropriate returning to in-class learning. Of course, at that time, it would be months before we all returned to the classroom. Now Eric has come back to school and he's doing really well. He took the opportunity to learn the skills remotely for him to acquire them. It also gave us time to develop a plan for him. And now he is a senior and a college-bound student, and he's doing absolutely phenomenal.
We're going to continue to learn how to partner together during the pandemic, and it isn't perfect. We're always coming up against our differences in our practice, and we're having to rethink again how best we can partner. How can we work together for the same aim? We don't have it all figured out by any means, but we wanted to share some of the tips and the strategies we are continuing to work on to help build this kind of partnership.
Our fourth action step is to create a common goal. So when everything shut down, we were rushing around figuring out what to do and how to provide our services. How do we help these kids? How can we support teachers? How do we support parents? And how do we support each other? So we initially focused on long-term goals associated with the school environments. We had to shift gears. We had to come together to develop short-term goals, both for our partnership and individual students.
And the second part, in terms of the short-term goals, we really had to rethink our partnership. What did we need from each other now? I needed to know what was happening at home and in the virtual classroom. And so suddenly I was building more relationships in the home environment where I was normally focused in school. I usually don't work directly with families when I'm consulting with a school. Erica typically develops the relationships with families, but now she's being pulled into virtual sessions and virtual classrooms, and I'm being pulled more into that type of role. So I needed her guidance and assistance in figuring out how to do this well and how to build those bridges and connections with the families so that they were also connected to Erica and her work within the team.
And I needed Rachel to help facilitate some of these programs in the home environment while I worked with the students. We were all trying to figure out how to implement IEPs and behavior plans in schools. We needed to recalibrate our collaboration in order to support each other, the schools, the families, and the students.
So we're just going to use a quick other story. I know we're running out of time here. But I began connecting frequently with one family to help transfer these skills from school to home. The kid's name was Tom. We called them every week, and I talked about how things were going in the home during remote instruction and tried to give the parents some problem solve some issues that they were having, like organizing his schedule and getting him logged on, helping him complete the work. I would chat with the family, go through some of these issues, make some recommendations, and then I'd report that to Erica and we would talk about it. And then she would pick out where she could support and where other teachers or school personnel could support. And she'd meet with the students remotely. And then she ended up touching base with the family as well, so they could start to get to know her.
One of the biggest challenges that was unique to this school year was not meeting with new students or incoming students face to face. So in Tom's case, I needed Rachel's information and relationship with Tom and the family to help build trust and a therapeutic rapport for myself in the emotional support teacher. This was a student who would often refuse to get online or show their face. So this was definitely a team approach. So where do we go from here? So we now obviously need to continue to grow our partnership. So we have made a lot of progress, and we have more to go. One of the biggest takeaways is the need for consistent communication in this ever-changing educational and mental health world. So flexibility is really key, and continuity has never been more important in growing mine and Rachel's working and professional relationship.
As we all know, the online platform has really blurred lines between home and work. We're all feeling that all the time. But it's also provided some more opportunities for families to be involved. So I have the ability now to be more present in meetings and have conversations with families where I normally wouldn't be there or I wouldn't be participating. And this availability and access to the remote platform has allowed for more communication between myself, the families, the student, and other team members like Erica. So we're able to have a little bit more of a different type of partnership and a different type of collaboration, because now I'm working with the team in a new way. This is one of a quote. You guys can read it, so I'm not going to read it to you. But I like this quote from Andrew Carnegie. And in education and mental health, you all know we're always forced to work with others. It doesn't mean that we're actually teaming well or learning from each other or having teamwork. True partnership, true teamwork means that we have to learn how to make decisions together and rely on another person's lens to inform your own. We always talk about interdisciplinary collaboration within disabilities and special education. What that really means in practice is that you have to be okay with someone questioning your work, asking you why, asking you to explain things, immediately disagreeing with you, Erica. But it gives you time to really think about, why am I saying this? Why do I think this? Or what might you have to contribute? It isn't easy. And COVID has forced us all to take on different roles or adjust our roles or expectations for the needs of the students and the team. But being vulnerable like that has been incredibly invaluable, I think, for both Erica and I to be able to grow our practice. So the one thing that we've really learned about partnership is that to partner well means hearing hard things from each other, hearing the hard truths that each other are saying, and accepting them, even if you don't agree with them. So one thing Erica and I think have done well is we know it isn't about being right. There's not a right. It's about being vulnerable and being able to really reflect and grow. If we don't do this, if we don't team, not only is it a loss for myself or yourself as a professional, it's a tremendous loss for the families and for the students that we serve.
So the one thing that is great with our professional relationship right now is Rachel and I are very comfortable in calling each other, and we use each other as sounding boards all the time. So we call each other when feeling frustrated. And so we're able to use each other as that platform. But Rachel might call me and say, "You're going to be disappointed in me," and I might say, "Yes, I am," or "No, I won't." What happened? So we have learned to have some vulnerability with each other and understand that the criticism is about growth and comes from a place of understanding. It is really hard to work with people who don't share your point of view. But it's also vital to work with people who don't share your point of view in order for us to grow. It is frustrating, but so important, because that debate forces you to reconsider what you think is important and how you think you can reach these end goals by being flexible and understanding.
I know we only have a couple minutes, so we're just going to go through a couple of takeaways that we've had over the past year. Erica just mentioned takeaway number one. The second takeaway we have is really communication. Delegate who is going to do what in your team. What are your roles? And that goes back to also staying in your lane. Don't volunteer to do everything when you have one specific role and one specific job within that team. And then also adapt as things change. I had to suddenly change my role when COVID hit, and I've learned how to adapt and how to also rely more on others. You will need to adapt some of your practice and thinking to make room for other ideas and points of view. You want to have the point of view, but you don't hold the lock and key on everything that is smart and right. Other people have opinions and scopes of practice, and you have to be willing to adapt your strategy to meet those end goals and the goals for the team. If you can't do this, you really can't work with people or expect to have positive outcomes. The last takeaway we talked about before is really the debate. We talked about the debate as being an important part of our partnership, but it's really important to have that willingness to debate, because that's when you develop trust. You develop trust when you have disagreements, when you have debate, and then you're both able to come back to the table, laugh about it, and then debate again. You might get angry, laugh, go back again, but that debate sets the stage for that kind of trust.
The one strategy that I know that I will continue to use when we go back to our new normal, and that's in air quotes, right? Is using the remote platforms to continue to build relationships. There are such benefits in seeing the person you are talking with rather than, having phone conversations. Don't get me wrong, sometimes, it's very annoying. And I don't always look my best, or I might look my best from the top up and have yoga pants on, but it's really great to put a face to a name.
We've also started to use, as I'm sure many of you, Google Drive or OneDrive or some kind of co-working online virtual space to co-work on documents, as well as using organizational tools like Trello to make sure that tasks are being completed. If there's multiple people on your team, every one of them can have a Trello board, or you can have Trello boards for different projects in order to make sure that all of you are accomplishing the tasks that you want, or tasks that need to be accomplished. All right, that's the end of it for us, guys. We really appreciate you're here listening to us chat about our partnership and our debates. We know it can be difficult when you come from such different areas, but we've really been able to develop a good relationship that focuses on collaboration, even when we disagree. And we hope that it helps give you some ideas. All right, we'll try our best now with some questions.
Well, and thank you both. Very much appreciative, and very interesting as well. So I got a couple questions here that came through. One here is the biggest takeaway from the collaboration as far as your personal sort of your how it impacts the services that you're going to continue to deliver. How has it impacted you? What's the biggest change personally?
I think,
Erica, go ahead, Eric.
See, this is where we interrupt each other. I think for me is that it's not about us. It's not about me or you. That it is about the students that we serve. And so I think that's my biggest takeaway. It's not about, again, like you said, about being right. It's about the students or the patients that we actually serve. So for me, I think that's my biggest takeaway in our relationship, that we've really been able to come to that agreement and agree that it's bigger than you and I.
What I was going to say on a personal note is the feedback, just having someone, don't take this the wrong way, or like criticize in a good way, continually have a critical eye towards the work that you're putting out is important, because I know we mentioned this in the presentation, but it forces you to really have to think through your explanation, your reasoning. Is there a different way? Is there a better way? How can you guys combine? And I think that, every critique is an opportunity, and nothing, working and collaborating with people who have different scopes of practice and different points of view from you will force you to think that way, because it's the only way you're going to grow as a professional. It's also the only way you're going to be able to do what Erica described, which is actually create a comprehensive plan and program for a child or a family.
What about how you would measure effectiveness? What would be like a different way, a different tool that you use, or metric that you use for measuring the effectiveness of your remote platforms?
For the remote platforms, I think for us, Erica, you can jump in, is if we've reached the goal. So if we've said, let's use the example that we had of Eric. So if we're working on this skill with Eric, is he actually practicing this skill? Was he applying this skill? Did he talk about it when he was working with Erica? Yep, this happened, and I thought about it, and I used, the skill that we've talked about. And then the ultimate test is, of course, generalization. Did he then use it, when he moved into the school? And then the other piece of that too was with connections with a family. is their feedback as well. Yes, we've seen him use these skills across these environments. And so from the remote platform perspective, I think it's still the same idea of their goals. It's just how you might measure them might be a little bit differently. You might use a little bit more interview. You might use a little bit different types of data based on, if I'm observing you in a classroom, I might just take account of how many times you're using this skill. And then ultimately, of course, are you using it when we go back into in-person?
Guys, I'm not quite sure if you have the answer to a couple of these remaining ones here. When a parent receives an IEP back that does not include things that were discussed in the IEP as far as goals, what can the parent do about that?
They should go back to the school. If it was in their conversation and they said that these things, if they had a conversation with the school and IEP meeting that agreed upon goals, then if you're agreeing upon it in the meeting, then it should go in the document. So they should go back to their case manager in the school about that.
And I'm going to try to pull a little bit here together. I am one of our questioners here is raising concerns regarding ABA itself and concerns of emotional damage to kids in its administration. Are either of you aware of that as a possible ramification of ABA?
I think those, well, I'll say two things. The history of ABA, 1970s, when it first got started, it was about, it was about creating a normalization approach more of behaviors. Luckily, the field and science from 1950s on has evolved, and the practice is about promoting the individuality of a learner, promoting their values, thinking about their values, what they want for their lives, and embedding that in any kind of practice that you use. If there is ever, from any type of program, ABA or not, if a child is in distress in a program, that program is not meeting their needs, and that service provider is not meeting their needs. So to me, that indicates you have to look at who's providing the service, because that science should not be the thing that is, it's not about the science causing distress, it's about the application. And there are like doctors, there are medical doctors, there are people that understand the practice, there are people that might not make the best decisions. And thinking about the responses of a learner, I think, are really important. And it's been a huge conversation within all special education communities in terms of thinking about how we respond to how students respond to different tactics and practices, and just making sure that we're always being aware and cognizant of their responses. I hope that answers.
To be honest, it sounds like a topic that would have made an interesting discussion to itself.
Well, yeah, there's actually there's some articles coming out about this, I think, and I can't remember the magazine now, but there's it's a debate, of course, but with any type of practice, I should add, ABA side, I'm a behavior analyst. I've obviously worked in the science of behavior, but I believe with any type of practice, if you have a provider that doesn't have the skill set, or is not applying the right tactics, you're going to have problems with someone learning those skills. And
but part of the other challenge that would come up as well is how you're able to measure the impact of it. And when you are having communication challenges to begin with, one could say that at least it would seem theoretically possible that you would not be cognizant of some of the impact of a therapy, and that may not give you the full understanding of how that person is reacting to it, right? So I mean, go ahead.
Yes. Oh, sorry. I'm so sorry. This is the interrupting we were talking about. Collaborative overlapping. I'll tell you what I tell supervisees and what I believe and have told preserve teachers is, if you have a learner who is non-vocal verbal and you are doing a practice with them, one, you don't ever teach a learner without describing what you're doing. You can say, hey, I'm going to prompt you now. I'm going to tap your hand. And if that learner pulls away from you, they're not giving you consent to teach them. They're not telling you yes. And you need to listen to that. And I think that's across the board in special education and education in general. We can be better listeners to our non-vocal verbal students.
But some who would have ABA could also be 2 or 3 years old, right?
Yeah, but
So,
sorry.
I just don't know if you would have that much of a response, but it's an interesting topic, and I don't want to kind of like you weren't here to speak to that topic. But the other one thing I did want to just mention or ask your thoughts on was regarding something that has come up to me before, both in relation to ABA and then in general sort of education experiences. So for example, whether it's ABA itself or whether it is school use of paraprofessionals, the concern that the efforts to help erode independence, and how that you balance between the help and changing someone's maybe natural independence that would be there in a way that could lead to perhaps harmful situations or decisions made down the road because the independent side has been so impacted by either the constant support, which in many ways is what people hope for, or the offshoot of different therapeutic techniques.
Erica, you okay if I chime in on this? I think there are different goals for all of those things. So one might be acquisition of a skill, and that might require more intensive support initially to get a student to acquire a skill, meaning that having a one-on-one, having more prompting. But the goal of every program should include, how are you going to fade or remove those supports? That should be involved in every program. And one thing I always recommend is, this is why you have a systematic prompting system, a system that helps you that everyone knows about, that everyone uses, to help to think about increasing that independence. Because it's not only ensuring a correct response, it's actually about teaching a student a way to learn that gives them some delay, that give them some immediate independence within that system. So instead of jumping in for a prompt every time, you wait, you have a set amount of seconds that you're waiting, and you increase that latency over time to increase some of that independent responding. And you also just need to take good progress monitoring. If a student is waiting at every time they get to a door for someone to open it, that's a pretty good clue to you that you need to start stepping back and giving more independence. And that's a conversation for the team to have. I will say school and home is really different. So, parents might see a kid at home who's incredibly independent, and that might not be the kid at school, or vice versa. So you're always continually thinking about, and maybe having conversations with the home to say, is this who you see? This is who we see. And thinking about how that might influence those behaviors. It's really tricky what you're talking about. It's a longer conversation. I don't want to, I feel like I'm doing a disservice to try to rush it. No, what you're asking is a big question that deserves a lot of conversation.
Look, ladies, I appreciate both your time and your professional expertise and what you stir as far as conversations amongst others. We always struggle when we do our summits to try and offer variety for disabilities and for perspectives. Speaking as someone who's neurotypical, I find it very difficult at times to always balance out the entirety of thought when it comes to a diagnosis of any type. And I'm not quite sure that's my role. But bringing different ideas and raising discussions definitely is, and hopefully finding ways as well that policies can help improve opportunities and independence for everyone, which I'm sure is a shared goal for people.
Yeah.
I do appreciate Watson. As I said, you guys have been around for a long time, been very active with us, and I've heard from many who have very valued your services. So I do appreciate that personally. Look, this session does wrap up our sort of 12 hours that we've done. And I want to thank everybody from Gateway, our sponsor, to our interpreters who have been with us the entire time, to every one of our presenters, to the legislators, to the dozens who submitted RFPs that we just couldn't fit in this year, to the hundreds and hundreds who registered to be part of this, and to those who sent questions and comments to us here to try and be part of the discussion as well. You know, our Disability Summit has grown to be the largest collection of disability and mental health resources in Western PA. We're very proud to offer that. It has been a great learning experience for myself and will remain a passion until I'm no longer in the legislature, and then we'll find another way to be of service and so forth. The best thing I could always tell everybody is, especially those who have a diagnosis of any type, is please tell your stories, reach out, be a great self-advocate. Patience, of course, is two ways. It's a two-way street, right? We all have a lot to learn about each other, but the goals are the same, right? So what anybody wants is generally along the same ways. And that's what we got to try and do to get there. And there are some ways Harrisburg can be much more helpful in the disability community. There's no doubt about that. And I hope that we'll see a stronger bipartisan effort in the times to come to help deliver some of that. Again, I always tell somebody, we don't need the picture ops, you know, for disability issues. We need the votes. And that's what matters the most when it comes to bringing about real change, is we got to have people who are willing to vote and sometimes make some tough choices that need to be done. But we have promises to keep, both as a state and as a country, and we're going to continue to try and push to do that. So thank you, everybody who's been part of our Disability and Mental Health Summit. We will be back. We will be back in next year. We'll be back, God willing, in person. That's what we're going to be doing with a more expansive program, and hopefully even more people participating. It's been a pleasure. So thank you, everybody who's made it successful this year. We'll look forward to the continuing discussion. God bless. Okay, don't forget get your vaccine. All right. Thank you very much.